Hello, everyone. So, today I want to review the latest book by right wing political commentator Charlie Kirk, which is titled The College Scam. So, as we can see from the title, um, the book has a forward quote by Tucker Carlson, which is a red flag. I think this book came out when he was still a Fox News commentator and still relevant, so I guess it made more sense to put it on there then than it would now. We can see on the back we have quotes by Donald Trump Jr., Senator Rand Paul, Lauren Boebert, and Dan Bongino, um, which are all people I would never want to associate with. And the book, in America at least, costs $29.99. So that's pretty cool. I also see that the book was published by Winning Team Publishing, which I know published a number of Donald Trump books, and I think the Marjorie Taylor Greene book, and they're pretty much just like a conservative publication. Um, Pretty terrible. All right, so let's get started. So the introduction begins with Charlie reminiscing about his own life and defending his decision to not go to college when he was younger. And from there, he presents the argument he's going to try to make for the rest of this book, which is that college is a scam and a waste of time, and that today's students shouldn't go to college. So I guess that's a good place to start. Charlie begins by talking about how when he was in high school, there was a very pro college culture surrounding what he did. So he uses the example of um, not it's not are you going to college, but where are you going to college to display just how adamant the high school culture was about pushing students to college. Um, and I can say, at least anecdotally, that was my experience in high school to an extent. I remember there was actually a lot of complaining because like people argued, college isn't right for everybody, but we'll get into that. So then he kind of says, okay, I guess that's what you do. So he talks about his experience trying to get into West Point Military Academy. He says that he wasn't able to get in, and that although it was discouraging, it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to him. And we'll get into why he said it was one of the best things that ever happened to him. But I recall before when he told this story, he used to blame it on affirmative action and say that his position was given to some, I don't remember exactly, but I think probably a black person. If only he was like 12 years younger, then he wouldn't have been able to make that lie. So after talking about failing to get into West Point, he discusses how he went to his next university of choice, which was Baylor University. I'm not sure where that is. Okay, so it turns out it's a private Christian university in Texas. So, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised by that. But once he got to Baylor, he discusses how he met with the president of the university, and the president asked him about what his life goals were, and Charlie, of course, responded that he wanted to build a youth organization. But then he talks about how the president surprised him and said that maybe you shouldn't go to college and you should just build your youth organization and you can come back later. And Charlie then goes on to explain how much he appreciated the honesty of the university president, as most university presidents are evil or whatever because college is a scam. Now, this is where I became kind of suspicious of this story because, as I recall, Turning Point USA was founded after a relatively wealthy Republican donor met Charlie and encouraged him to start a youth organization to expand outreach to young conservatives. So I'm kind of skeptical of Charlie's portraying of a Turning Point USA as this like grassroots political activism campaign that organically inspired young people to become conservative. For example, here is the Wikipedia page of Bill Montgomery, and if we look under career and activism, it reads Montgomery spent his working career in marketing. After retiring, he founded Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk in 2012. He served on Turning Point's board and as its secretary and treasurer until spring of 2019. Montgomery met Kirk when the latter was 18 after hearing Kirk speak at a small college. Montgomery has been described as Kirk's mentor. It's also funny because if we read under death, it says he died of complications from COVID-19 in July 2020 at age 80. After his death, Turning Point USA deleted a tweet that mocked wearers of protective masks. Whether Charlie's story is correct here or not isn't really the most pressing issue. And so I kind of just want to get into the arguments he makes as to why college is a scam and a waste of time. So Charlie ends the introduction by telling the reader that he's going to be putting the college industry on trial for the remainder of this book for, I don't know, I guess being a scam and a waste of time. And he does this by introducing the 10-count indictment he's going to charge against the college industry. So basically, he follows this format for the remainder of the book, with each chapter representing one of the charges he's going to lay out against the college industry, and subsequently the evidence he provides to support those charges. And he does this through the course of 10 chapters, with each chapter representing one of the charges in his 10-count indictment. Now, I'm going to try to go through all of the charges he lays out against college, although some of these are, I don't know, like I feel like I'm going to have trouble being this disciplined. But let's get started. So in chapter 1, he makes the argument that, quote, colleges and universities are running a scam. Now, unfortunately, I feel that during a lot of this book, he's just taking whatever anti-college arguments he can find and just throwing them against the wall to see what will stick. So because of that, a lot of the information which he complains about in chapter 1 is also discussed at other sections of this book. And because of that, I don't really want to go over each of these pieces of information twice, so I'm going to be somewhat selective in how I cover this, especially because this approach seems to lead to the information being presented in a somewhat messy, scattered way. So, yeah. So something I said that chapter 1 spends a lot of time discussing, as well as the introduction, is the trying to understand why we go to college. In a section titled Anti-College Equals Pro-Education, he says the following: let me be clear, I strongly believe in education. I believe that colleges and universities can play a role in a functioning civil society. Historically, higher education has made an indispensable contribution to society. There are a few small, independent institutions that still offer a robust education in the Western philosophical tradition, the great books, and the U.S. Constitution. There are a few colleges that reinforce character, faith in God, and the responsibilities of American citizenship. He then goes on further down to say, the overwhelming majority of colleges and universities have rejected Western culture, the U.S. Constitution, and any notion of character education. They are aggressively atheistic and anti-American. They have passed any possibility of reform. The pragmatic truth is that it's too late to turn this ship around. Colleges and universities have ceased to be centers of learning. Instead of making students stronger, wiser, and better equipped to contribute to society, today's higher education industry leaves students debt-ridden, brainwashed, and incapable of rational thinking. Today, the best education is self-education. So I guess I do want to give him some credit here, because I feel the general conservative movement in America, at least in contemporary times, is the attempt to commodify college, right? So I feel like conservatives want to argue that the only reason to go to college is so that you can get job training, so you can go work a job and make a lot of money at your job and serve your capitalist overlords. But traditionally, the argument for college, and that many, I guess, leftists will still make, and they should be making, is that college is a place you go to learn to be like a better citizen, and you learn to critically think and to learn about society and know your place in society and know how to be a good person. As well as, why not? Like, if you can get some skills that you can commodify, sure, that's good too. That Charlie acknowledges that higher education could be used to create a more educated society is admirable in my opinion, but from here on out, he argues that it no longer serves this purpose because obviously it's been corrupted by corrupt Marxists. I know this book is about college, and so I don't want to spend too much time discussing Charlie's conservative ideology here, but it seems like he just wants to make college an indoctrination center pretty much, which I feel like just kind of ruins the point of critical thinking. And it seems like that might be his argument because the attacks he makes are just projections of that, pretty much. Like, his attack is that college has morphed into this place where students go to be indoctrinated by, Marxist professors and to learn woke ideology. So after this, his argument then becomes, well, if there's nothing salvageable about the education you'll receive, at least you'll get the credit so that you can get a good job after college because employers look for college education, clearly. But then he kind of trashes that too. So for example, on page 27, he says, quote, "Where did the everybody goes to college assumption come from? It can be traced to the decades from the 1960s to the 1990s when there was a much higher correlation between a college degree and a good paying career. But the world has changed. The job market has changed. Universities are very different from what they used to be, yet our cultural assumptions have not kept up with changing times." So unfortunately for Charlie, there's actually a lot of data which disputes the claim he's making here. Um, and most of it comes from post the 1990s, so it directly counters his argument. So, for example, here's a chart from the Social Security Administration, which shows a direct correlation between education attainment levels and level of income. And this is just one table. There's many other sources which and studies which conclude the same thing. So, I don't know about that. I think a lot of this is just in service of one of the broader goals or aims he has or had in writing this book, which I think is to promote like an individualistic philosophical interpretation of the world or way of viewing the world. So, for example, right after he unsuccessfully tries to argue that there isn't a correlation between college education and earnings, or the correlation isn't as great as it used to be, he makes the argument that the real factor is that those who are most likely to succeed in college are most likely to succeed in life. Basically, I think the implicit argument is that it's more of like a drive thing, and that the people who are going to go to college were going to succeed anyway, and it's just, college is just the external metric imposed upon them by society that we apparently use to determine what success looks like. And I think to some extent that's probably true, but I don't know how relevant that is to his broader argument that college in society is just a waste. Well, to him it makes sense because his argument is that all education has been corrupted by Marxists. But for me, who believes that that isn't true, I think everybody having the opportunity to go to college would infinitely help our society, even if just the most successful people are the ones who benefit, or the most motivated people. And honestly, I don't know to what extent that notion that those who were going to succeed in life were going to succeed in college can be generalized. Like, I do believe that putting most people through school of any sort would probably improve their intelligence and ability to analyze information. But even if we want to take his argument seriously, um, that logic holds for literally everything ever. This is just an attempt at society to shape people so that they go down paths that are beneficial to society in some regard. But for right now, let's just indulge in his hypothetical that those who are most likely to succeed in college are most likely to succeed in life, and I'll argue why that's still of benefit. Like, I guess you could argue the same thing regarding K through 12 education in America. Like, the people who were going to succeed regardless, so it's just a hurdle. But I think this is just where our differences in opinion regarding what college is supposed to do become prevalent. Because as I said before, job training and becoming skilled for a specific job can be helpful and a useful utility of college. To some extent, it should just also be a means to make society more educated and more aware of things that are going on and allow people or harbor an environment where people learn to think more critically. So, and I think at some level, this would work to shape what the motivated people strive to become and achieve regardless. And I think even because of that, it's working in favor of society. Like, if somebody who's very motivated has the opportunity, because college exists in America, to go to medical school or study, like, I don't know, something in biology, and then can, like, create a new medicine or cure for something, then I think college served its purpose because it educated someone to a level where they could use that education to create something which made society better. But because for Charlie this book is about commodifying college, this conversation has to be more nuanced. So while he does concede that there are some things worth going to college for because there is a specific utility you can achieve or get out of them. So, for example, he talks about like law school or like to become a doctor and stuff like that. He still seems to reject the premise that generally people going to college would make society more well educated or would be of benefit to everyone. And I think this is kind of the most revealing part of this book because it kind of lays out moving forward fundamentally what his attack is about. And that is to go after like basically just liberal arts majors. And he wants to do this obviously because they're the ones who pose a threat to his conservative ideology. So really fundamentally this book is just a defense of conservatism. That's all. For example, right after this section he goes on to defend STEM majors and discuss how that's still a degree with respectable amounts of utility. But from here on continues to attack humanities professors and students who study in the humanities and basically just the curriculum of college. If we remember back to the beginning of this book, he tried to argue that college has been infiltrated by like Marxist Leninist professors or whatever, and they're corrupting the youth via education. But I mean that's always been the conservative argument regardless, but so practically it seems that he's just afraid that younger people have the opportunity to go to college and learn about things that might challenge the conservative hegemonic worldview or ideology as implemented in the United States. And so, because of that, let's just demonize college, right? And I think to an extent, most of the remainder of this book can be viewed through this lens. So, for example, we can look towards the end that count 9 of his 10 count indictment is literally just colleges and universities have unleashed waves of woke anti American activists. And then count 10 follows with many professors are leftist radicals bent on indoctrinating students. And I feel that to some extent this is exemplified by the instances he provides of supposed examples of colleges failing to teach students now. Um, as a lot of the examples he gives us are just things like a professor talked about capitalism in a negative way, or a faculty member at a college acknowledged trans people existing has scientific backing. So it was more just being upset that certain things were discussed rather than a substantive critique of those things and why they could be wrong or why they should not be taught at colleges. And even where he does provide supposedly like scientific metrics which prove that colleges don't teach anymore, a lot of these are immediately contradicted by other arguments he makes. So, for example, he cites a study which apparently measured students' scores on a CLA exam at the beginning of college, and then those same students, I don't know, like 2 years later or something, and found that almost half had no meaningful improvements in their ability to critically think or write. But he follows this with the argument we discussed earlier of those who are most likely to succeed in college being most likely to succeed in life, which implies that even if some students wouldn't get anything out of college, the college existing and the students who were going to succeed regardless going, it did propel them to success. Like it gave them some information which could be used. So clearly it served some utility, even if not everybody benefited. But I almost refute that too. Like when he cites this study, he then gives context which tells us that the results varied by college. So some colleges did actually improve people's scores when they went. So it's more of a college thing than like an entire attack on higher education generally. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and I could be wrong, but I believe a lot of these arguments are just circular. He does an entire chapter on the supposed violence that's being bred by colleges, um, leftist violence, of course. And I was originally going to go through each story and like try to do fact checking because I'm sure he's leaving some information out or not giving some proper context or embellishing something. But honestly, I don't even really care. Like violence on campuses against right-wing activists, I don't care. As I said earlier, this book is trying to espouse a very like individualistic worldview, and so because of that, a lot of it is just advice to the reader about how to go about your life by not going about college and how to be successful by not going to college. So I kind of want to discuss that and see like practically how well his life advice checks out. So he makes the classic like plumber argument, like, oh well, think if your pipe blows up in the middle of the night or whatever, who's gonna fix it? And they're gonna cost a lot of money. And yeah, that's true, and you can make a lot of money being a plumber or like whatever, and like you don't need to go to college for that. But again, he fails to see that like market saturation is a thing. Like not everybody can do that, right? Like I don't know the limitations of the invisible hand, maybe I don't know. And then he kind of goes on about how great America is. There's actually a chapter after the 10 count indictment chapters called Only in America, where he basically just says, like, oh, well, it's America. There's so much opportunity here. You can just use that. You don't need to go to college. And to back up this claim, he just gives us anecdotal stories of people who succeeded from nothing in America. Um, there's no, like, citing of, like, some statistic which shows, like, a homeless rate or, like, wages tied to inflation or anything like that. And as I said, this book becomes more political as it goes on. So towards the end, he's just giving us his philosophy about, like, I don't know, general antagonisms in society and how that fits into the college narrative. So for example, he spends a couple of pages going through the history of what he perceives to be the class antagonisms of society, and he uses this to assert that the college educated are actually the elites that are keeping the working classes down. So on page 219 he says, quote, Hansen dubbed the ruling class the Skype Zoom class, those on the highest educational and economic rungs of society. They pull the strings and wield the power. He calls them the Skype Zoom class because, during the pandemic, they made bank by sitting safely in front of their MacBooks. They were the corporate executives, stock traders, market analysts, and hedge fund managers who made a six-figure living, or more, in the brain power professions. They are the ambitious class that Tom Wolfe called the masters of the universe. On the opposite side of the divide, out in the real world, lives the working class, the quote, muscular class, as I call them. They didn't have the luxury of making their living from their couch and computer keyboard. They were out in the community, braving the virus in blue masks, working in grocery stores, installing HVAC units, unclogging pipes, repairing appliances, delivering meals for DoorDash, leaving packages for Amazon, and taking risks so the Skype Zoom class could remain safe behind their computer screens. The divide between the Skype Zoom class and the muscular class goes way back. In cultures where slavery was commonplace, ancient Egypt, China, Babylonia, Persia, Greece, India, the Roman Empire, the Islamic Caliphate, the pre-Columbian America. Okay, hold on. The powerful upper class owned the muscular class. During the Barbary slave trade of the 18th and 19th centuries, North African pirates captured and enslaved more than 1 million Christian Europeans. Slavery was also widely practiced during the European colonization of America. In those cultures, the rich, powerful, well-educated elites owned the powerless, uneducated, but physically strong underclass. The upper class has always felt entitled to exploit the production of the underclass. When slavery was abolished in the United States by the 13th Amendment in 1865, the upper class could no longer own the muscular class, so the upper class began to rent the muscular class by paying wages, and by keeping those wages as low as possible. But America invented something that enables the muscular class today to thrive and achieve great wealth. America invented the free market system, which is the basis of the American dream. Jesus Christ. I don't even know where to start with this. I guess the first thing I thought was that it was kind of weird. He really went on a tangent about all the places that did slavery in the past and then only subtly brought up America, even though this book is pretty much just about America. Um, I think it's just because right wingers love to play the victim, and that they feel threatened when black people try to play the victim in America for their systemic oppression. Um, I don't know, just my guess. But the actual argument he's making here, that somehow the class antagonisms of history and ruling elites suppressing the working class is somehow manifesting in college today, is kind of insane. Like, is his argument that throughout history, the thing that set people apart was just, the elites went to college and the slaves didn't? Like, the slaves could have been elites, but they just didn't go to college? Like, what does this even mean? Like, I would imagine America commodifying education, especially because, college tuition in America is ridiculously high, has had infinitely more of an impact on, like, keeping people economically impoverished than anything else. Like, and which one is it? Because for a majority of this book, he's been arguing that student debt is a reason to not go to college. Like, all these liberal arts kids come out with student debt and are just losers because they have student debt. Like, I don't know if that's making your case here, man. But that's nowhere near like the most ridiculous argument he just made there. Obviously, the most ridiculous thing he said was that America inventing the free market system has helped the underclasses to improve their conditions. I mean, just basic history lesson. America did not invent the free market system, like whatsoever. Um, and the free market system existed during slavery. Like I would argue fundamentally the free market system was instrumental in the American slave trade being anywhere near as large as it was, or for slavery generally in America to be anywhere near as large as it was or prevalent as it was. And has the free market generally enabled the quote unquote muscular class to achieve great success and wealth? Like, last I checked, over half of Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck. Like, I don't know if that's indicative of that. Honestly, I would argue that the free market system has been what is perpetuating this inequality between the wealthy and the poor. So Charlie ends the book by basically just reiterating what he's been saying the entire time, that colleges used to be good because they taught students to love God and serve humanity or whatever, but that the radical left Marxists have corrupted the institution and are now radicalizing students and indoctrinating students into hating everything that made America great. Really, he's just projecting all conservative left wing um, conflict into the college movement here and saying it's like a fundamental thing that has to go.